أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مباركا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. O Allah, we ask you to bless this gathering. We ask you, Allah, to shower your blessings and your mercy upon this gathering and to surround this gathering with your angels and to make this gathering worthy of mention to those in your presence. O Allah, we ask you to fill our hearts with your abundant mercy and to fill our homes with your abundant mercy. We ask you, O Allah, to protect us and to protect our families and to protect our communities from every harm and from every evil. O Allah, we seek refuge in you from the evils of our souls and the sins of our our sins and our evil actions. We ask you, Allah, to protect us from the evils of the devil. And we ask you, Allah, to protect us from before us and from behind us and from our right and from our left and from above us and from beneath us. We ask you, Allah, to make us steadfast upon truth and to bring ease to our lives. Oh Allah, we ask you to make us steadfast upon Islam and to bring ease to our lives. Oh Allah, help us navigate through every trial and difficulty. Help us navigate through every trial and difficulty. Oh Allah, make our last words in this dunya, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Resurrect us under the banner of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, and bless us to drink from the palms of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a drink that will never feel thirst thereafter. Oh Allah, teach us of the lives and times of the righteous predecessors. Teach us of the lives and times of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Bless us to follow in their footsteps. Bless us to follow in their footsteps and gather us with them and with our dearly beloved Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the shade. The day that there's no shade but your shade. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Amma ba'd. Brothers, if you could please come to the center, as this is the sunnah of the majalis. For those of you at the side, come please and make a halaqah and make a circle, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Today, we're going to begin discussing the second greatest man who was a companion to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and that is Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. The story of Sayyidina Umar is one that's very inspiring because it is one of the greatest examples of human transformation. And this is something we discussed in the khutbah today. Sayyidina Umar, his life resonates with many of us because Sayyidina Umar was a man who stood for justice, who stood for principles. And people love that. People are attracted towards that naturally. People who have a sound fitrah are attracted to people who are strong in doing truth and stand up for what's right. Because it takes a lot of guts and a lot of strength to do that, especially in the light of the trials that we're facing as a community, as an ummah today. It takes a lot of guts to stand in the face of those trials and to stick to what you believe in and to stick to your principles. And I'm sure all of you know and you're well aware of the recent incidents that happened in New York and its connection to the Patterson community and some of the things that have been said about our community and some of the threats that have been made. We live in times of great trials. And when we learn about great people like Sayyidina Umar, it gives us strength and it gives us resolve to deal with those trials. Because Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, and all the other companions, they were individuals who had to deal with the same struggles. They were able to overcome those struggles and be better for it. So their lives were not ideal. They were not perfect individuals. They were not always the great and they did not always lead the great and illustrious lives we know them to have led. As we mentioned in the khutbah, Sayyidina Umar, he lived 65 years. 30 of those years were in darkness and obscurity. He was a nobody. He was just like an average person of the time. He wasn't notable for anything or for much. In fact, he was known to be one of those who gets publicly intoxicated, as he said about himself. وَإِنِّي كُنْتُ لَأَشْرَبُ النَّاسِ لَهَا فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. I was one of those people who drank it most, the alcohol, in the days of ignorance. He wasn't from a noble family. We don't know much about his father. His father was very tough on him. He would tend to the camels and his father would exhaust him with work and when he wouldn't do everything that was expected of him, his father would beat him for not meeting his expectations. Sayyidina Umar, those 30 years, his youth, all of it was away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only that, in fact, he was an obstacle in the way of those who were trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do what's right. And we mentioned many examples of this. We mentioned how he used to torment some of the Muslim slaves. And one of the woman slaves that he was punishing, he beat her so much that he got sick of hitting her. He got tired, he got exhausted. And he was a brute and powerful man. He was strong, he had a strong build. He got tired from hitting her. And he said to her, you see, look at the mindset before his Islam. He said to her, I apologize. The only reason I've stopped hitting you is because I've got tired of doing it. This is how he was before the light of Islam entered his heart. So the story of Sayyidina Umar is one that every one of us can relate to, especially if we've experienced years away from Allah. Whether we were Muslim but only by name, or whether we were following another faith and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us to the light of Islam. So Sayyidina Umar, he was the second greatest companion of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was the second of the khulafa after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the four khulafa, they all had some level of relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of them more distant than others. Because as you know, it was a tribal community, and they knew their ancestors. Now, if you ask many of the youth, they maybe don't even know all of their uncles and aunts because they've never met them. They might not know the name of their great-grandfather or their great-grandmother. But the Arabs, they used to take pride in knowing not only their first grandfather, their second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. They could link their genealogy generations back. So Sayyidina Umar, just as the other three khulafa, had some level of relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. But Sayyidina Umar was the most distant among them. He met with the Prophet ﷺ in the eighth grandfather. Sayyidina Abu Bakr met with the bloodline of the Prophet in the sixth grandfather, 6 generations back. That's when their bloodline meets. Now Sayyidina Uthman and Sayyidina Ali, they were a little bit closer to the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Uthman, only 4 generations back, the bloodline of the Prophet ﷺ meets with Sayyidina Uthman. Sayyidina Ali, as you know, he was the first cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. They both had the same grandfather. Now the first 2 khulafa, they had another relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. They were both what? Who knows? The father-in-law. Sayyidina Abu Bakr was the father-in-law of our Prophet ﷺ because his daughter, who was Sayyida Aisha, was married to the Prophet. And Sayyidina Umar, he was also the father-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ because what? His daughter, what was her name? Hafsa, his daughter Hafsa was also married to the Prophet ﷺ. And actually Sayyidina Umar's kunya was not Abu Abdullah. His son, his most well-known son was Abdullah ibn Umar. But they used to call him Abu Hafs. Sayyidina Umar, they used to call him Abu Hafs because of his daughter Hafsa. So he was also the father-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ. Now the other 2, Uthman and Ali, they had another relationship besides linking with the bloodline of the Prophet. They had another relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. What was it? They were both what? They were both the son-in-laws of the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Uthman, he married 2 of the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ at different times. One of them passed away and then he married another one. And that's why he's called Dhun Nurayn, Sayyidina Uthman. And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib was married to who? Fatima. He was married to Fatima. Yeah. So Sayyidina Umar, he was from Bani Adi. And this tribe wasn't well known among the Arabs in Quraysh. But there was a notable figure from this tribe by the name of Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. And we mentioned this man when we were mentioning the life of Sayyidina Abu Bakr. Does anyone know who this man was? Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. He was from a category of people before Islam. We called them what? Does anyone know? We called them al-muwahhideen. These are individuals who believed in one God. But because the Prophet hadn't come yet, they did not know the details of revelation or prophethood or anything of the sort. They believed in one God and they refused to worship idols. We called them al-hunafa. We called them the hunafa. They believed in one God, they were the hunafa. So Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, he was related to Sayyidina Umar. He was actually his cousin. But he was a lot older than Sayyidina Umar. He passed away before the Prophet ﷺ came. Now his son was named Sa'id ibn Zayd. Sa'id ibn Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. Sorry, a lot of names here in the beginning. I'm just introducing to you the family of Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Zayd, he was married to Umar's sister. And the story of Umar's conversion he's going to play a role in the story of Umar's conversion later on, inshallah. So Sa'id ibn Zayd was married to Umar's sister. Her name was Fatima. Okay? And Sayyidina Umar was a lot younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, when we think of Sayyidina Umar, we think of an older man who was strong and powerful and full of wisdom and knowledge. But in fact, he was 13 years younger than the Prophet ﷺ. He was born 13 years after Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant. The Prophet ﷺ was born in Am al-Fil, right? Most of the companions, by the way, they were young individuals. Sayyidina Abu Bakr was considered one of the elders among the companions. And he was 2 years younger than the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ was 40 when he received revelation. Sayyidina Abu Bakr was 38 at the time. Sayyidina Umar, he was still 27 at the time. He became Muslim in his early 30s. But nonetheless, he was also considered among the group of the companions who were relatively older. Sayyidina Ali, he was 30 years younger than the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ received revelation, he was only 10 years old. Now, of course, we read great things about Sayyidina Ali, and we think that he was this old, wise, shrewd man. But at the time some of these stories took place, he was only 10 years old. He was only a teenager. But the companions, they were disciplined and raised to be men when they were young. And this is something that we need for the young generation growing up. We need to raise our children to be men and women at a young age. Don't let them grow up like the rest of society is growing up to reach 20, 25, 30, and they still have no responsibilities and no independence. No, we want them to be just like the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, living for great things from a young age. Living for great things from a young age. So this is something unique about the companions. Most of those who followed the Prophet ﷺ were relatively young individuals. And that's because for one to turn to truth at an old age is very difficult, is a very big test of one's ego. For him or her to say, I've been living the past 50 years or 60 years of my life, I've been living a lie, and I disbelieve in everything that I've lived for up until now, and I'm going to believe in something else. That is a very big test for one's ego. And if you hear, and there are many stories of people who convert in old age, if you hear a story of such an individual, know that that person, Allah blessed them to overcome a great deal of the personal struggles to reach to that point. Because it's not easy. The older you get, the more you get set in your ways. And that's why most of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ early on were young men and women. Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, throughout his lifetime, I'm not going to go into too much more details about the family, but I'm going to mention this. Throughout his lifetime, he was married and divorced on and off to 7 wives. You know, he would get married to one, they would divorce. He would get married to another, they would divorce. But his 2 most well-known children came from his first wife. And that is Hafsa and Abdullah ibn Umar. And it just goes to show you the companions and the people of that time, they had a different culture. If a woman would get divorced during those days, it would be very easy for her to find another partner, and they would get married again. But in many cultures in our day and age, unfortunately, when a woman gets divorced, the community indirectly indirectly puts an X on her, or they put, oh, this is like wal-'iyadhu billah, something like, oh, don't go near it. No, this is a very big problem. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they were not like this. So that's why Sayyidina Umar, he was married on and off throughout his lifetime to 7 different women. And Sayyidina Umar was actually a relative of Abu Jahl, who was one of the biggest enemies of Islam, and he was considered the Fir'aun of this ummah. He was considered the Pharaoh of this ummah. Abu Jahl was the first cousin of Sayyidina Umar's mother. He was the first cousin of Sayyidina Umar's mother. In any case, if there's anything that I would like us to take from the early life of Sayyidina Umar, it's that Sayyidina Umar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him after his youth to follow the message of Islam. And one doesn't know when that spark of Iman may come into the heart of an individual. But when that spark of Iman comes, depending on how truthful that individual is and how sincere that Iman is, that individual can become an entirely different person and can have a very impactful life regardless of the point in life they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Umar, only the second half of his life was for Allah, but he became one of the greatest individuals in human history. And there are other examples of this, other people finding guidance later on in life. And one of these is a man by the name of Abu Raja al-Ataridi. This is a man who lived during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but his eyes did not open to truth until after the Prophet passed away. And the way it opened to truth was he was traveling with his family, and they had their idol among their luggage. And during those days, as he describes, the idol worshippers would take either a sheep to worship, or they would take a stone to worship. Whatever they could find that impresses them in its appearance, they would start worshiping it. So they had an idol, and it was among the luggage. And this idol fell in the middle of the desert as they were traveling. And they went searching for their God. They went searching for their God. And they had to search in the sand, and he finally found his God dug underneath the sand and sunken into the sand. And he said, "Inna ilahan lam yantani' min turabin yaghibu fihi la ilahu su." A God that cannot even shield himself from being buried in the sand is a worthless God to worship. So his eyes opened up to truth. And he went to convert, but the Prophet ﷺ had already passed away. So he learned from the companions, and he became a great Muslim after that. So that spark of Iman, when it comes in the heart, brothers and sisters, it can do great things. And that's why, as we said in a recent khatira, our predecessors, they say, لَيْسَتِ الْعِبْرَةُ فِي مَنْ سَبَقْ إِنَّمَا الْعِبْرَةُ فِي مَنْ صَدَقْ. It is not about who's first. It's all about who's most sincere. It's all about who's most sincere. So this is the early life of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. And there are a few other things that is mentioned about the early life of Sayyidina Umar. And one of these things was Sayyidina Umar mentioned to the people, "O people, I remember when I used to tend to the flocks of my maternal aunts of Banu Makhzub, and they would give me a handful of dates or raisins, which would be sufficient for the day, and what a day that was. And then he came down, and one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ told him, "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, all you did was put yourself down in front of the people. Why would you mention this disgraceful part of your life when you were a nobody and you were just tending to the camels?" So he said to him, "O Abdurrahman ibn Auf, I was alone and I started to think. I said to myself, you are the Khalifa, who is better than you? So I wanted to remind myself of what I really am." Sayyidina Umar, after he became the great man he did not forget his humble origins. He did not forget the darkness that he was in and the light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. So what he did here was he reminded himself of some of the humbling situations that Allah put him through in his early life to humble himself. And this is very important. He did not want his position and his status to get to his head. And I remember one of the stories about one of the shuyukh and the scholars of our time who passed away a few decades ago. You know, whenever people would gather around him and mention his praises and raise his status, he would go and he would clean the bathrooms. And they found him one time cleaning the bathrooms, and they said, "Shaykh," and this guy, he's a world-renowned scholar. He passed away a few decades ago, Shaykh Sha'rawi. So they said to him, "Shaykh, why are you cleaning the bathrooms?" And he said, "I'm cleaning the bathrooms to remind myself of our humble origins. And I don't want my nafs, I don't want my mind to go to a whole nother level that isn't befitting for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." So these were the humble origins of Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar, at his best, he was among the middle class. He wasn't a wealthy individual. In his early life, he was very poor. But with time, he gained repute. Of course, when he grew up and his body grew and he was a very powerful and strong man, he started being heard among Quraysh, and he would wrestle, and he would engage in some of the sports with them. And he was actually known to be a good ambassador for Quraysh. He was given an eloquence in speech, and he was able to fight for the rights of his people and his tribe. And so they would send him on their behalf in many of those situations. He was a learned person. When we think of Sayyidina Umar, we only think of a powerful man. No, he actually knew how to read and write. He was one of the few in Quraysh who knew how to read and write. Not many people at that time knew how to read and write, but Sayyidina Umar was one of those individuals. The other thing to note about the early life of Sayyidina Umar is that because he was an ambassador for Quraysh, because he was one of those individuals that Quraysh would turn to keep the community together, he had strong opposition towards Islam, not based on ideological grounds, not because he loved worshipping the idols, but his opposition to Islam was cultural. He saw Islam as a threat to their way of life. And in fact, this became so much more persistent in his mind when Sayyidina Hamza became Muslim. He looked at Quraysh and he looked at Islam, and he said that Islam is coming to divide our families, and Islam is ruining our way of life. And that's why he despised this message early on cultural grounds, not on ideological grounds. Now this is the story of his early life. When did his heart start turning towards guidance? This is something that we need to address. But before we address that, there's one issue that's often mentioned about the days of Jahiliyyah for Sayyidina Umar. And that is, they say that Sayyidina Umar was one of the individuals who buried his daughter alive. And you know, this was a practice in Arabia. It wasn't a practice done by everyone. Certain individuals did it in Arabia. It wasn't every single girl was buried in Arabia. And the reason why they did this was because they saw the girls at the time as a shu'um, a burden and as an awful thing to have. They wanted to have boys, they did not want girls. Right? So they would see it as a shame to mention to the people that they were given a girl, although this is one of the greatest blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it wasn't a categorical practice, as we said. So they say that Sayyidina Umar, he buried his daughter, and that was one of the things he wept over after his Islam. However, by the way, how many of you have heard this story before about Umar burying his daughter? How many of you have heard that? Raise your hand. It's a very well-known story, right? Very common knowledge. However, this, in fact, is not one of the things that Sayyidina Umar did. He tortured Muslims, yes. He drank alcohol, yes. He killed Muslims? No, he didn't kill anyone, right? He was known for other things? Yes, he was known for other things. He wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ? Yes, he wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ. But did he bury his daughter alive? No, this is a fabricated story. This story is not mentioned in any of the history books from the early days. This was mentioned later on. And the greatest proof that it's a false story is, who's his eldest daughter? We said his name is what? Abu Hafs. Who's his eldest daughter? Hafsa. Hafsa was born before Islam, right? How come he didn't kill her? If he was one of those people who practiced this, how come Hafsa was alive and well way after Islam and she went on to marry the Prophet ﷺ? So this is definitely a fabricated story. And also this wasn't one of the practices of his tribe. Like we said, it was only a practice of some of the Arabs. Only the worst of the worst would do this. Bani Adi was not one of those tribes that did this. Another example is who? His sister, Jamil, right? His sister also was alive and well way before Islam and after Islam as well. So this story, if you've heard it, mention to everyone after that you hear saying it, that this is in fact a fabricated and false story that is not authentic about Sayyidina Umar. Now, the first ray of light into the heart of Sayyidina Umar. When did that happen? Sayyidina Umar saw a family getting ready, packing their things to go to Habasha. And Habasha, Abyssinia, had a just ruler. And that ruler, he wasn't Muslim. But Muslims sought refuge by him because of his justice. He was a Najashi, right? He was a Najashi, he was a just ruler, and the Prophet ﷺ instructed the companions to seek refuge in his kingdom. So they were getting their things together, and Sayyidina Umar, he came to this woman, and he said to her, "Are you leaving, O Abdullah?" She said, "Yes. You have persecuted us and oppressed us. And by Allah, we are going out in the land of Allah until Allah grants us a way out." So Sayyidina Umar reacted in a different way than he usually reacted. Usually Sayyidina Umar, he would react in full force with rage and anger. But when he saw this woman's state, she was distraught and sad, and she had her children with her, and they were getting their things together, his heart softened up a little bit. And he prayed for her. He said, "May you find peace." And Abdullah, when she saw this, she went to her husband and said that, "I saw Umar different than I've ever seen him before." So he said to her, "What are you trying to say? Do you think that he's going to become Muslim? By Allah, he will not become Muslim until the donkeys of his father, Al-Khattab, become Muslim. No way he's going to become Muslim." Right? So that's how the companions viewed Sayyidina Umar at that time. But the Prophet ﷺ had made a dua. "O Allah, give honor to Islam with one of the two Umars." Who were these two Umars? Umar ibn al-Khattab, and the second one was Abu Jahl, who was known as what? What was his name? Amr ibn Hisham. So his name was Amr, not Umar, right? But in Arabic language, we have this way of expression that they shorten things under one name. So they made Amr and Umar, they made it Al-Umaran, right? "Oh Allah, give victory to Islam with one of the two Umars, the most beloved of the two to you." One of them became the Fir'aun of this ummah, And one of them became the symbol of justice for this ummah. And that was Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. So she knew that. This was the first ray of light to penetrate his heart. And this shows us, brothers and sisters, this dua of the Prophet ﷺ, the importance of the da'wah and of the Muslim community having what we call champions or strong individuals who are in a position to champion our cause to a whole nother level. And this is something the Prophet ﷺ was very keen on securing for the Muslims. Of course, not at the expense of champions, of other champions, or of other companions who were champions in their own right. Right? What I mean by that was the Prophet ﷺ, he was eager to give da'wah to those in positions of power. But one time, the Prophet ﷺ was approached by a group of the leaders of Quraysh. And they said, "O Muhammad, we want to listen to your message. We're interested in hearing what you have to say, but make for us a gathering separate from these slaves and lowly people." They were talking about some of the companions like Abu Dhar and Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi and Bilal. They despised the idea of sitting in the same circle as these individuals who were their slaves before Islam. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ was told by Allah, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. Stay with those who are praying to Allah day and night, seeking His pleasure. And do not turn your eyes towards the pleasures of this world, the hopes of having such individuals on your side. Don't do it at the expense of these. Islam needs champions. Islam needs strong individuals that champion our causes. And Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Hamza were two of those individuals that the da'wah gained in the early days. And the Prophet ﷺ, as we're going to find out later, he was very happy when Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Hamza converted to Islam. And immediately after that, they went to the Kaaba and they prayed publicly. For the very first time, they went and prayed publicly in the vicinity of the Kaaba. And that's why Sayyidina Umar, he was referred to as Al-Faruq. See, after he converted to Islam later on, he said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Aren't we upon truth and they upon falsehood?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "Yes." So then he told the Prophet ﷺ, "Then why should we hide our faith? We should go announce it to them." And so immediately, the next day after that, they went out in 2 rows, and Sayyidina Hamza was in one, and Sayyidina Umar was in another. There was 3 days between their Islam, by the way. Umar and Sayyidina Hamza, 3 days. And they went, and the disbelievers of Quraysh, when they saw Umar and Hamza, who were known to be reputable and powerful individuals, they were known to be warriors. They had a position because of their strength and their bravery among the people of Quraysh. When the kuffar saw them on the Muslim side, they were very disheartened. They were very disheartened. So anyway, that's why Sayyidina ibn Mas'ud said about the conversion of Sayyidina Umar. He said, "Inna Islam Umar kana fathan." The conversion of Umar was a victory in itself. And his hijrah, when he went to Medina, his hijrah was nasran, was a victory for the Muslims. And his imara and his leadership was a mercy for the Muslims. His imara was a mercy for the Muslims. So this is something very important to keep in mind in the approach of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Umar, he became Muslim in the 6th year after revelation. And there were, according to him, he said there were 39 Muslims at the time. And he was number 40. But some other reports say that there was actually a little bit more than that. There was 40 men and 11 women. There were others who Sayyidina Umar didn't know about, because a number of the companions did not announce their Islam. They kept it concealed and hidden, because they were not in the lofty position that Sayyidina Umar was in. They did not have the luxury of challenging Quraysh, because if they did, they would be in a very, very, very difficult situation that they could not endure. So he was number 40 among the men, and he converted to Islam in the 6th year after revelation. Okay, so what triggered his conversion to Islam? The story of it is very well known. He was sitting among Quraysh and they were discussing the idea of killing Muhammad because he was dividing the community, right? He was dividing the community. So they said, who will kill Muhammad? Sayyidina Umar, he said, I'll do it. So he left in a fit of rage and he had his sword out and he was walking through Mecca and he came across one of the companions. He did not know he was a Muslim. He came across one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and this companion asked Umar, where are you going to? And Sayyidina Umar said, I am looking for this sabit, for this one who has changed his religion and who has divided Quraysh, insulted their intelligence, criticized their religion, and slandered their gods. I'm going to kill him. So this companion of the Prophet wanted to redirect Sayyidina Umar away from the Prophet ﷺ. So what he did was he said to Umar, why are you wasting your time following the Prophet when your own home has converted to Islam? Your sister and her husband have gone upon the religion of Muhammad ﷺ. The reason why he said this was he knew that Sayyidina Umar won't kill his sister. He knew that Sayyidina Umar won't kill his sister, and at the same time he wanted to protect the Prophet ﷺ. So Sayyidina Umar, he went to his sister and her husband, and they were reciting from what surah? You know the story, right? Surah Taha, right? So they had one of the other companions inside. Who was the one that was teaching them how to recite it? His name was Khabbab ibn al-Arat, one of the companions of the Prophet. So they heard Sayyidina Umar, they hid the papers, and Sayyidina Khabbab hid in a side room. And Sayyidina Umar entered and he said, what was that murmuring that I heard? What was that sound that I heard you making? So they said, it was nothing, we were just talking. So they said, no, have you left the religion of your fathers and gone to the religion of Muhammad ﷺ? And that's when Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Zayd, who was a cousin of Sayyidina Umar, said, oh Umar, what if the truth were in something other than your religion? So Sayyidina Umar, again, he was, I guess you could describe him as a hothead. Sayyidina Umar, when he heard this, he immediately began to manhandle Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Zayd, and they started wrestling. And his daughter and his wife, the wife of Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Zayd, came to stand between them. And Sayyidina Umar slapped her in the face, and immediately she fell to the ground, and she said to him, Ya adu Allah, atadribuni ala an wahid Allah. She said, oh enemy of Allah, do you hit me just because I believe in one God? Again, you see, this is a story that we know, but when you internalize it like this, when you feel that struggle that they were going through because of their Islam, that basic struggle, it led them to appreciate their deen so much more, brothers and sisters. Now we can taste that struggle in our day and age through the struggles that Allah has put in our life and that sweetness of faith that will come with dealing with that struggle. We cannot approach our problems that we're facing today with retreating and running away from them. I want to hide my Islam. I want to mask my Islam. I don't want to talk about it in public. I don't want people to know that I'm Muslim. As though I'm afraid of how they're going to react to the idea of me being Muslim. No, we can't approach our problems in that way. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ did not approach their problems in that way. So, when he heard this from his sister, his heart softened up. And he felt awful that he did this to his sister, and his sister was in this very emotional state. So he asked her, give me those papers. Give me those papers. I want to look at them. So she said, no, I'm not going to give them to you. He said, I promise you, I won't do anything wrong to those papers. I just want to hear what this messenger is saying. So she said, if you want to read them, you need to purify yourself first. And then he did so, and he read the verses of Surah Taha, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened his heart to Iman. And he said, the one who says this, no one should be worshipped other than him. Tell me where Muhammad is. You see, brothers and sisters, not everyone who appears to be an adversary of Islam, they're not all the same. They're not all in one category. And this is something very important to note. Sayyidina Umar, what did it take to change his perspective on Islam? All he needed to do was to hear the message. He heard the verses and immediately they penetrated his heart. They changed his perspective. So many people, because they don't know about our Islam and our deen, they have these misconceptions about our faith, and we're partially to blame because of that, because we're not doing our job as Muslims in this country and in this, and the responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on our shoulders in conveying this message as we should. Right? So many people, when they hear that guidance, their perspectives will change. And that's what we learn from Sayyidina Umar quickly changing after he read a few verses from Surah Taha. He went from being that individual who wanted to kill the Prophet to recognizing, hey, this message really isn't so bad. It's not calling to division like I thought it did. It's not calling for terrorism and oppression like I thought it did. It's not calling for the abuse of women like I thought it did. We need to do our job in clarifying those misconceptions. The Prophet ﷺ understood that not every disbeliever of Quraysh was like Abu Jahl, and not every disbeliever was like Abu Lahab. He had the wisdom and the vision to recognize that no, we need to treat people, even if they're not upon our faith, differently. They're not all the same. لَيْسُوا سَوَاءً. Allah says it in His book, they're not all the same. And that's why the Qur'an makes it a point to establish common ground between us and with Christians and with the Jews. And He mentions that we have guidance and they have guidance. They had a messenger that came to them. So, brothers and sisters, this is something, one of the lessons we take from this aspect of the life of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardah. So, Sayyidina Umar, after that, he went and he met with the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Hamza was with the Prophet. And they were waiting for him at the door. They opened the door for him. They said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends if Allah intends guidance for Sayyidina Umar, then we welcome him. But if he doesn't, then we will be there to defend the Prophet ﷺ. He was knocking on the door and they were terrified. They were terrified because they knew it was Umar, and Umar is a powerful individual. But they opened the door for him, and the Prophet ﷺ grabbed Sayyidina Umar with full yaqeen. And he said, O son of Khattab, what is it going to take for you to come out of the situation you're in? I'm afraid you'll stay in this situation until Allah sends a calamity upon you. So Sayyidina Umar said, O Prophet of Allah, I've come to declare my Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ did takbir, and the companions did takbir along with him. This was the story of his conversion, and it's familiar to many of you. But after his conversion, something very interesting happened. Sayyidina Umar, he wasn't one to keep his Islam private. No, he wasn't. He wasn't afraid of anyone, Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar, immediately after he became Muslim, you know what he did? He went to his cousin, Abu Jahl, and he knocked on his door. And he said to him, Abu Jahl said, who is it? He said, the son of Al-Khattab. He came out to me and I said, did you hear that I've changed my religion? He said, have you really? He said, yes, I've become a Muslim. And then Abu Jahl told him, no, don't do that. He said, I've already done it. And so then he went to another person from the nobles of Quraysh. He knocked on his door. And he said, do you know that I've changed my religion? And he said, no, I didn't. Have you done so? Don't do that. He said, I've already done it. And he went to another and he did the same thing. Sayyidina Umar, he wasn't prepared to keep his Islam to himself. In fact, he went to a whole nother level. He went to, I guess you could call him the town gossiper. In Quraysh there was an individual who was very well known. He never left anything to himself. Whenever you wanted news to spread in the whole city, you go tell this guy, everyone will find out about it before nightfall. All right? Some people, they're like that. That's their whole life. They hear about something that happens to fulana, and they go one call after the other. Did you hear that fulana did this and said that and msharif? And then they go to another sister and they say, did you hear that fulana did this and said this and did that? And they go to another person and say the same thing. Some people, that's who they are. And it's a very unfortunate and bad quality, but nonetheless, Sayyidina Umar used it in his favor here. He went to this man, his name was Jamil ibn Muammar al-Jumahi. And he said to him, he sat beside him and he said, do you know that I've changed my religion? And this man immediately stood up and he said, O people of Quraysh, I inform you that Umar ibn al-Khattab has apostated and left the religion of his forefathers. And so Sayyidina Umar was behind him and he said, no, he's lying. I did not apostate, rather I became a Muslim. And they began beating Sayyidina Umar by Hijr, Sayyidina Ismail, and fighting him, and they were attacking him from every angle. And Sayyidina Umar, he was fighting back. In fact, it's mentioned that he grabbed one of their nobles, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, and he pushed him down to the ground and he sat on his chest. And he began pressing into his eyes. And Utbah began to scream, and the people stood away, right? And then again they began fighting, and they kept on fighting back and forth until noontime. And Sayyidina Umar at this point, he got exhausted, fighting back and forth. And finally they were going to come to him and he said, what are you going to do? And then a man called out and he said, what's going on here? What's going on here? And they told him, Umar left the religion of his forefathers. And so this man, his name was Al-As ibn Wa'il. He was the father of Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. He was the father of Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. Al-As ibn Wa'il, he was a shrewd man. He was a respected man among Quraysh. Again, he did not accept Islam, but again, he was not one of those individuals who was staunchest in his enmity of Islam. No, he wasn't like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, right? So he said to the people, what is the matter with you? He said, so what? He converted and he left the religion. A man chose a religion for himself. Do you think that Bani Adi are going to leave you to kill one of their own? So he convinced them to leave Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab alone. After that, the Muslims for the first time were able to gather in circles around the haram and to speak about their religion and to worship in the vicinity of the haram. Before that, they were not able to do that. Okay, so and this is the effect of someone like Sayyidina Umar standing up for what's right and standing for the da'wah. So Sayyidina Umar, and I guess this is, I'm going to conclude soon with this message. Sayyidina Umar, he was also the only one among the muhajirin who publicly announced his hijrah. Again, this is part of his personality. Not everyone was in this circumstance, right? We had Sayyidina Ammar ibn Yasir. Sayyidina Ammar ibn Yasir, the disbelievers, they tortured him and punished him. They tortured his mother and father until they were killed. And his mother, Sumayyah, she was the first woman martyr in Islam. And they were torturing him and they said, leave the religion of Muhammad, disbelieve in Muhammad. And he finally said, I disbelieve. And then he went to the Prophet, his heart was broken. He said to the Prophet ﷺ, I said the words of disbelief because they were torturing me. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ, except those who are compelled, but their hearts are full of faith and iman. The Prophet ﷺ told him, وَإِنْ عَادُوا فَعُدْ, if they go back to torturing you, then don't feel sad and regretful that they force you to say the word of disbelief, as long as iman stays in your heart. So not everyone was like Sayyidina Umar. They could stand and take that staunch and powerful stance. This will always be the case. There will be those individuals who are willing to stand in front of tanks and protest and without any weapons or anything like that. And there will be those people who would never ever do that. No way am I going to stand. We see those pictures, right, coming out of Palestine from a long time ago. A young boy carrying a rock and throwing it at a tank. You see, and you look at that picture and you're like, well, wow, what is, how could these young men be like that? in the face of bullets, they don't have any weapons, and yet they're still standing strong. Not everyone's going to be like that. They have that strength to do such a thing. But Sayyidina Umar was one of those individuals. Sayyidina Umar, he went to the Haram, and he said to the people of Quraysh the following, after going to their circles and telling them, I'm leaving, I'm going to Medina. He said, whoever wants his mother to be bereft of him, whoever wants his mother to lose him, and his children to become orphans, or his wife to become a widow, let him meet me behind this valley. Sayyidina Umar was the only one who had the audacity to do this. All the other companions, they left under the cover of night, in the darkness. They left in secrecy. They fled to Medina. But Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he wasn't about that. He told them, I'm leaving. You want to die? Come follow me. And 20 companions went with him, and they followed him to Medina. And then the Prophet ﷺ came soon after that. So Sayyidina Umar, the story of his hijrah begins like this. But he actually made an appointment with 2 other companions of the Prophet ﷺ to meet them at a certain point in the hijrah. One of these was Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah, right? And the other one was Hisham ibn al-As, I believe it was. Hisham ibn al-As. Yeah, Hisham ibn al-As ibn Wa'il. So he agreed with these 2 individuals that they'll meet. And one of them, Hisham, he wasn't able to make it. His people kept him behind, and he wasn't able to make hijrah. And he was one of the Muslims who were weak and oppressed and remained behind in Mecca, and the Prophet would pray for them. And the other one was Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah. And the story behind this is Ayyash, his brother was Abu Jahl. His brother was Abu Jahl. They came and they met Umar and Ayyash during the hijrah. Abu Jahl and the Ayyash's other brother. So they met Umar and their brother Ayyash while they were doing hijrah. And they told Ayyash, your mother has taken an oath that she won't eat and she won't drink until you return to her. And she's standing out in the sun and she won't bathe. She's refusing to bathe until her son comes back home. So they kept on talking to him, and Sayyidina Umar was like, don't trust them, O Ayyash. Don't go back with them. So he said, his heart softened up to his mother. He said, I'll just go check on her and reassure her, and I'll get some of my belongings and I'll come back and I'll meet you in Medina. So Sayyidina Umar said, if you will go, take this camel with you. This camel is a trained camel and it's fast. If you find that they're going to betray you, ride on the camel and run away. Right? So they went and they traveled. And Abu Jahl told his brother Ayyash, I feel very exhausted and tired on my camel. Can I ride with you? So he said, fine. And when Abu Jahl got down, they attacked Ayyash and they tied him up and they took him back to Mecca, and they did not allow him to go on hijrah. And the Prophet would pray for these individuals, like we said. He would say, Allahumma anji Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah. Oh Allah, rescue Ayyash from the situation that he's in, and the other Muslims who were left behind in Mecca. So this is the story of Sayyidina Umar during the Meccan period. After that is the Medinan period and some of the battles that he undertook with the Prophet ﷺ, and some of his attributes and his descriptions. And inshallah we'll continue to talk about that in later community hubs, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Before